Plato, the architect of thought. Plato is known today as the architect of thought. But young Plato's first passion was not philosophy. He wanted to be a playwright and a poet. He was even keen on writing tragedies. Interestingly, Plato disliked his early works and burned them with his own hands. Why? According to some historians, everything in his life lost its meaning after meeting Socrates. According to other researchers, his writings were not even considered worthy of being staged. This small detail marked the beginning of a giant transformation in his world of thought. Plato claimed to have witnessed Socrates' trial, but he was not there when Socrates was executed. Historians say he was ill. However, there is another possibility. Perhaps he knew he couldn't bear the death of his teacher. Socrates' death shattered all of Plato's hopes, and this breaking point drove him away from Athens and dragged him on a long journey. Few people know where Plato went after leaving Athens. According to ancient sources, he went to the temples of Heliopolis in Egypt. There he learned from the priests about mathematics, astronomy, cosmology, and ancient doctrines concerning the immortality of the soul. Some historians say the seeds of Plato's philosophy were not sown in Athens, but in the shadow of the stone walls of Egypt. Plato's life was not as tranquil as we might assume. Around the age of 40, he was sold into slavery by the tyrant Dionysius in Sicily. Yes, one of the greatest names in Western philosophy was once a slave. The incident was simple. Plato criticized the tyrant's concept of justice. Dionysius grew enraged. He put him on a ship and sent him to the slave market. Fortunately, a philosopher admirer named Aniceris of Cyrene bought him and restored his freedom. After this event, Plato's faith in politics was completely shattered. He dedicated himself entirely to philosophy. When he returned to Athens, he founded the first school of thought for humanity, the Academia. There is one little-known fact about it. A sacred olive tree dedicated to Athena stood inside the school. Damaging this tree was punishable by law. There is a famous phrase said to have been written on the gate: "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter." But there was no such inscription really at the entrance of the Academia. It was an unwritten rule. Because, according to Plato, anyone who didn't know mathematics and geometry didn't know how to think either. To know how to think. Everyone has heard of the myth of Atlantis. But most people do not know that it first appears in Plato's texts. Atlantis is not mentioned in any other ancient source. That is why it is still debated. Was Atlantis the story of a real continent? Or was it a metaphor created by Plato to teach a political lesson? Only Plato knew the answer, and he took it with him. Plato died in his 80s, but the location of his grave is unknown. Some sources say he was buried in the Academia's garden, but there is no definitive proof. Some say, well, Plato has no grave because his home is his ideas. Plato was not just the philosopher of the theory of forms. He was a poet whose dreams burned, a traveler who endured exiles, and a thinker who passed through the slave market, a researcher who studied with Egyptian priests, and a sage whose mystery remains even after his death.